Welcome back to Pia Pops Off, a podcast where I talk about everything and anything, usually pop culture. And today we are popping off about yet another Diddy documentary. Bum, 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 bum. And this one is available on Max, and it is called The Fall of Diddy. And we are popping off with one of my TikTok friends, Nat. And I asked her on because I just covered the Peacock version documentary on Diddy, which was called Diddy, Making of a Bad Boy. And in that documentary at the end, Nat was featured in the documentary as a TikTok creator who has been covering the case. So I am mutuals with her on TikTok, and I actually she's been one of the places that I've gone to keep most up to date with what's been going on with the Diddy case. So I reached out to her and I said, would you be interested in covering this documentary? And she was like, fucking game for it. So we are popping off with Nat, and we're going to be breaking down what Max covered, what Max didn't cover, and all and everything in between. But before we get into that, I have a little Pia Pop business to attend to. I will be going out of town for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to the motherland. I'm going to Africa. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. I am going to be doubling up, tripling up, and I'm going to be making sure that I give you, it's probably going to be like smaller portions, not as long as this episode's going to be, but you're going to have still an episode each week. And on the docket, I have Josh, who I also am friends with from TikTok. We're going to be covering the behind the scenes of Summer House and what's been going on, especially with the upcoming season that's coming on. And then following that, we will be talking to Jordan from Bravo's Summer House, Martha's Vineyard. We have a lot of exciting things happening while I'll be all the way in Africa, but I promised you, I told you I was going to be consistent when I started this podcast, and I wasn't going to leave you hanging. And you know what? I didn't, so I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm going to pat myself on the back. And you know how you could pat me on the back? If you're listening to this at the audio version, if you can please rate, subscribe, and leave a favorable review, probably, please. And then also, if you're looking at the visual, hey, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you stay informed when I drop the visual, and then also like, and don't be afraid to pop off in the comments if you agree, disagree, or if you have any suggestions for future episodes. I am all ears. I want to connect. So let's just get right into it, and let's see the fall of Diddy. Hi, Nat.
Hello.
I am so excited to have you on the pod. I have been following you for a long time on TikTok. That's where I discovered you. And you're one of the first places I go when something drops in pop culture. You watch a lot of the same things like Bravo, and you're so relatable. Like I don't know you, but I feel like I know you, and I know we chatted online, here and there. So I don't know. It's great to actually have a conversation with you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. It's so good to see you face to face. And I've also followed you on TikTok for a while now. And I love what you do on there. Like you said, we talk about a lot of the same things. I love your editing style. So it is super cool to get the chance to chat with you face to face finally. And I'm excited to get into it. You said, do you want to come pop off about all this? And I could not help myself. So here we are.
I'm so excited. I was like, I hope she says yes. And when you did, I was like, oh, perfect. Because I knew you were covering Diddy. You've been really good I love true crime. And you're always really, really good about covering, especially true crime stuff. Like I know you covered Quiet on Set. And you're always so quick. And I think one of the reasons why I love following you and a lot of other people love following you is TikTok is a platform where, yes, you can have curated stuff, but a lot of times the things that are more palatable or more like something that you want to like keep taking in constantly are the people who are just not like putting on a facade. They're just reporting it and just giving their honest takes, and it's genuine. And that's what I don't feel like you're really good at not putting too much of your opinion in things. Like, yes, you have an opinion, but it's just like you just want to have a chat. You're opening up a dialogue, and I love that. I feel like you don't alienate anybody really, and that you're reaching.
No, I do. That is like the whole point. I just want to chat with everybody about it, and it is so much like quicker when you can just pick up your phone and be like, "Did you guys see this? Do you know this is happening?" You're getting it in real time. It's like authentic reactions. And like you said, it's easier to follow and somewhere that you can like keep coming back to where you know that everybody there is like interested in chatting in the same thing. So I have been covering the Diddy stuff for like quite a while. I think back to like November of 2023, I started making those videos. So it's been like a long thing, which is kind of crazy to think about because when I started it, I was just like reading the headlines and being shocked along with everybody else. So
Yeah, I mean, when the Cassie lawsuit first dropped, and then the raids, I mean, it was just one thing after another. But it's honestly been easy to keep up with what is such a complicated case because of your people like yourself, TikTok creators that have been making the case more palatable in bite sizes. Because, like, I covered the Peacock documentary, which was Diddy making of a bad boy, and when covering that, I realized, geez, because I personally didn't think that documentary was even that detailed, in my opinion. I thought that a lot of stuff was left out. And then in going and recapping it, I was like, geez, I didn't realize how much stuff there really was there and how much stuff I know because of content creators like yourself that just keep me up to date because it's a really complicated lawsuit.
there's a lot of it and it is really heavy stuff. And so I think TikTok is a place where it's a little bit easier to like make it more palatable and make it shorter content that's just kind of informative and to the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I like the Peacock documentary. It was shorter and it's really just gave you like the outline of
Yeah.
things. There wasn't like a ton. It tried to kind of detail or outline like each big thing. But I think that this one on Max it was nicer that it was longer and they were able to give more details of
Right.
all these scenarios and all of these kind of side characters and everything else that's kind of going on adjacent to the main stuff. So it's a lot. It's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
And I was glad that this documentary was 4 parts because I think that was definitely needed.
Yeah.
Um,
No, yeah, I think that I think that Max usually has the better quality documentaries in general but I actually did appreciate the Peacock documentary while watching the Max documentary just because it was like the Peacock documentary was like would it be called a prelogue? Like it's what I needed.
yeah,
It was a background
right.
information where then when I was watching the Max documentary, I was like, I already had things like filled in the like
Good
they didn't have to
reference.
like they didn't have to I didn't need it's almost as if that they were working together like, oh, you covered that, so I will cover this. I don't
Right. And
think
it's
that's what
almost
happened.
totally like they had given like kind of bullet points. And then as you watch the other, you can kind of like refer back and be like, oh, that's what they were talking about. And that's what went down. But it
Right.
was nicer to see it in longer form where they were able to get a little bit more in depth. So I liked
Yeah.
that.
And
And
also
there was still things that were missed, you know, it could have, there's still a lot that was missed in it. So
I agree.
it's
There were
crazy.
still things that were missed even in this documentary, and one of them is it was missed in both. Like, because there were some things missed in this one that I thought that the Peacock documentary covered, and then vice versa, right? But there was one in particular that both of them, I feel like glazed over, which we'll get into it as we kind of recap it. But before we get too far into the recap of the Max version, which is the Fall of Diddy, I want to really have the audience get to know you, and I want to know how and why you even got into content creation.
Oh, sure. Okay. So I started on TikTok. Actually, I was like a new mom. I had decided to become a stay-at-home mom, so I was home with my son. Before that, I had been working in veterinary medicine for a long time, so I was like new to being at home with a baby, and kind of figuring out like what am I gonna do? How am I gonna make some money? Um, but at first, that was not the goal. I literally just woke up from a nap one day and Scandival had hit. And I was like, I have to talk to an adult about this. Like, I can't talk to a toddler about this. I've got to talk to some adults. And so I brought up a green screen on TikTok and I was like, have you guys heard about Raquel Leviss and Tom Sandoval and started getting into all the Vanderpump stuff. And that's just like what I was interested in. I've always
Mhm.
loved reality TV. So I was basically just like, I can't doom scroll anymore. I'm just going to start
Right.
making videos about what I want to talk about. And like, I was lucky enough to find other people who also wanted to talk about that stuff. And it's just kind of grown from there. So it was kind of an accident, and I was just looking for other adults to chat with about pop culture, and it's turned into this like really cool thing. So now I'm here with you, which is awesome.
I mean, you're amazing at it, and that actually tracks and makes sense. You had no agenda. That's I think the best content creators, the people that just genuinely, and people can tell, just genuinely want to chat, talk, and get other perspectives and other opinions. And I similarly, I was on TikTok. I started TikTok. Now, I didn't start creating TikTok, but I joined TikTok in 2020 during the pandemic, like a lot of other people. And I didn't really understand it. Then I kind of fell in love with it because I was isolated, and it became fun, and I was just doom scrolling, and I had no intentions on posting. I wouldn't even know what to post. I didn't know that I would have anything to offer. I was like, I just want to be a consumer. And similar to you, I think one of my first TikToks, like real TikToks, because I was just doing like lip syncing things like here and there, posting that, just for funsies. Because I didn't understand the app. I wasn't trying to like
Yeah,
blow up on TikTok. Yeah. So the first video where I actually wanted to like put an opinion out about something was, I believe, when Britney Spears's autobiography had dropped. And I started seeing all these content creators talk about the book, and then I bought the book and I read it, and then I started digging it. And I'm a type of person that does this like for no reason. I like without needing to
yeah,
make content. I just like need to know every detail about things. That's just how I am. And then the more I
yeah.
learned, the more angry I got. And I picked up my phone and I just ranted about Justin Timberlake, and I pressed to upload. And I didn't think anybody was going to see it, really, because I've had at the time maybe 200 people see a video that I've done that, and it went, like, I would say mini viral. And then I just kept on talking, and then I was like, okay.
Yeah, like, I guess we're doing this now. I totally agree. I think that that is like the only way it works is if it's something that you're like actually organically, passionately want to talk about. Like everything that I talk about, I'm actually interested in and would be like diving into myself, whether I'm putting it on TikTok or not. So
Yeah.
it's just nice to like have a community who also like cares to talk about that stuff. I think that's like the coolest part.
Absolutely. It has to, and I've told this to a lot of people that like will send me suggestions, which I absolutely love. But they're like, oh, you should talk about this because it will go viral, or, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'm not going to talk about it just because I know like it possibly could get numbers, because I can't, it's not going to come off the same way, because if I don't like care about it, it's not going to translate. Like, I don't know anything about that, and I don't even have any interest to learn more about that. So it's like, you know what I mean? It has to
Totally.
super duper interest me. And again, I feel like the videos that do the best for me are the ones that you can absolutely tell my passion about. Like, I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like,
Right, the ones where you, like, have to pick up your phone and be like, "Did you guys see what's going on?" Like,
yeah,
I think that that's the best way to go is just, like, off your raw, authentic, reaction, and people of TikTok love that, so
yeah. It is so much different, TikTok than Instagram, in my opinion. I cannot post the same things that I post on TikTok on my Instagram, because I do post most of my content like post it through YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. But I've learned that Instagram has a certain audience, and I would say it leans a little bit more conservative. So like anything political, anything like race based, I tend to lose followers if I post about that. And it's just not the same humor level is just not there. They're like more
no,
interesting,
yeah.
like light gossip. Like, it's not the same. I don't know if that's your experience,
No,
but
no, the vibe is not the same. When we had to go over there for a couple hours when TikTok was down,
yeah,
or at least I had to. I am over on Instagram and I do like it. I try to post what I can, but not everything that hits on TikTok is like received well over there. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like that there's already kind of like rules and like codes that people follow on those
Yeah.
apps, and it's not as authentic and raw. And so when people see that over there, they're not as nice. I would say that the
Oh,
vibe is
no.
not as nice over there. Um, but I try to delve into it, you know, I try to get over there a little bit. But you're right, it's not the same vibe.
It's not the same vibes, but it's okay. It's because I'm like, okay, I get it. This is what you want on. And the thing is, yeah, I still, post on Instagram. I still do all the things because, again, you know what? Everybody needs something different. And so I've just learned over time, like, I mean, I can do whatever I want. And then sometimes I do still post things that I know will lose me followers. If I am, again, if I'm passionate about it, I'm going to fucking do it. It's my fucking page.
Right.
And to me, if you're going to unfollow me for something that I actually genuinely believe in, that like actually means something to me, then that's fine too. But generally I try to keep it to the demographic of what they're looking for, because again, I am trying to provide value. And if you're looking for more, like, I feel like Bravo content, like, or like lighter pop culture stuff, I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, that is a good point. It's a little fluffier, which is fun. I mean, we need
Yeah.
that too. We need that side too, so
Yeah, we need all the different types of flavor, because we all have different type of personalities. Sometimes you don't want, like, you do want something that maybe is put a little bit more put together, and then sometimes you're just like, I'm just trying to like kiki with my friends, and that's why I'm over on TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
trying to we're trying to
definitely.
talk shit and gossip without filters.
Right, and make jokes. The comment sections on TikTok, everybody is so funny over there. Highly
So
recommend.
funny. And it's like people like that don't even make content. Like, I've seen people say this, they're like, I don't make content, but I am comment famous.
Yeah,
Like,
comment famous.
and it's
I believe
true.
it, yeah.
I
Like,
feel like
we've
one of the first times, before I even started making content, I made a comment on someone's like viral like Thanksgiving. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was like this Thanksgiving post with this little kid who was saying what he's thankful for. And he's getting so emotional about it. He's like, I just love everybody. And he's like going on. And it's so funny because it's so genuine and sweet. And I was like, this is me after one drink. Like, to my friend. And I think that thing had like 25,000 likes. I was like, ooh, I'm comment famous.
Yeah. There should be, like, a badge for that or something.
Right. Um, uh, but speaking of TikTok, and that's my preferred platform, because I can like I said, I can get all of the things that I need, the gossip, the news, and I can get it quickly. I saw that you were covering Diddy, and you've been one of the main accounts that I followed to keep up with it. To be honest with you, I've posted about Diddy, but I'm not the person that's going to keep you up to date necessarily, like in real time. I'll probably like wait a little while and then do a take. And you are there. You're up, and
I try to be.
you are to the point where you were featured in the documentary that we were talking about earlier on Peacock, Diddy Making of a Bad Boy. You were featured at the end as one of the content creators talking about the case. And I was like, oh my God, I no-ish her.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it was. There's a little clip at the end there. Just because I think I have been covering it for so long, like literally since before the Cassie and Diddy even settled, I think that I had made videos saying like this is going on and this is a big deal, which obviously that was a huge turning point. So yeah, I try to be on it, and it's really just because I'm interested, I'm
Yeah,
consuming it as it's coming out, and that's kinda how I stay on top of it.
perfect. Well, okay, so let's just get into it then. So this is the so we are recapping Investigation Discovery's version of the Diddy saga, this horror. And by the way, before we get into it, huge trigger warning: this podcast is going to be covering a documentary that has to do with abuse, sexual assault, uh, a lot of different sensitive topics. So if this is something that could possibly trigger you, please skip, and we'll see you at the next episode. So yes, we are recapping the Investigation Discoveries documentary, The Fall of Diddy, and it actually I watched the last installment this morning because I didn't realize that there were five. And
Yeah.
they're actually, at first I was like, oh, five, are they gonna be like an hour long? That's like a lot of information. but they did a really good job of like giving you enough information in about like 20 to 30 minutes per episode, which I appreciated because it like it's a lot and it's a heavy subject. So it was just giving me just what I needed. They were trimming the fat, but still giving me enough information. And they broke out down the episodes. Like episode 1 is the making of a mogul. Episode 2 is Empire Under Fire. Episode 3 is Untouchable. Episode 4 is The Fall. And then episode 5 is The Assistant. And I loved how that they structured this in comparison to the Peacock documentary, which I felt like was kind of giving me whiplash a lot because of the back and forth and the timeline, which I understandably, because it is, this case is spanning over like decades long. So you have to kind of go forward to go backward to go forward. But I felt like Max or Investigation Discovery did a really, really good job of doing that and not and the pacing and keeping me not confused, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I liked that it was 5 parts. It was really like 4
Yeah.
40-minute parts and then like a little last part, which I liked. I thought that the longer form, we were able to get the details that we needed, but it was still like fast paced. And like I kind
Yes.
of have a hard time with my attention span with long form content like that. So I was surprised like how well it kept my attention. It moved quickly, but it also gave you more detail than we've been seeing. So I appreciated that they did it in parts like that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And again, keeping up with the case and also watching the previous documentary, I felt like I got to not I don't want to say got to enjoy it, but it was an easier watch. And I do have a really short attention span, so I felt like I watched this was a very, very simple watch. So I highly recommend this documentary. It's if you're just looking for the crux of what's going on, I think that this one covers it perfectly. I don't even think you would need to watch the Peacock one. But but honestly, the more information, the better. I know that there's Netflix is probably coming out
There's
with one
so
too.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that 50 Cent was trying to get one sold to Netflix as well. Or I think he did, but it hasn't aired yet. So there's a lot of them and there's a lot coming out. But I think that this one on Max, the Investigation Discovery, they did a really good job of kind of trimming down what you needed to know and covering it in a way that was as digestible as it can get. But obviously there were some really like graphic and detailed parts, which I think that we need to hear to kind of know the extent of what is going on, you know, what
Mhm.
this really means. And if you're not going into these lawsuits and really reading the details of what these women are alleging, I think that this is like the best way to consume it would be like through documentary to kind of get firsthand stories and like to hear it as opposed to having to go through like 50-page documents and stuff like that. Like, it's nice that they broke it down in this
Yeah.
way, I think.
Yeah. It's essentially an audible with a court case, essentially.
Yeah, which is hard to hear, but
Yeah.
I think they did a good job. So
Yeah. So we start out with, I feel like the first episode really covering how we got to who Diddy eventually became. So it's like his childhood essentially. And one of the main people to kind of articulate who Diddy was as a child before he became Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Brother Love was his childhood friend Tim. Tim really gives us an insight into Diddy and the trauma attached to him. And I don't know if what was your impression on Tim? And
Um, so Tim was also in the Peacock documentary, which I watched first. And the impression that I got there was I couldn't really tell if he was kind of holding his loyalty or if he was just trying to give a true kind of look at who who Diddy was as a child. So I think that I don't know. I don't know what to believe of what he says. I think that he has grounds to talk about, what he was like as a young child. And he said in the Peacock one, which he didn't mention in this one, that Diddy was like kind of weaker and picked on a lot. He was bullied by a lot of the boys in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so that was something that stood out to me that was in the Peacock one that they didn't mention in this one, was like how he was kind of like the boy who got picked on very early on. I thought they covered that a little bit better in the Peacock one, and that was
I
all
agree.
information that came from Tim. So I think that was valuable information to have because it gives you that insight of like, okay, is that why he became so
Violent.
violent, aggressive? Yeah.
I agree. I did kind of change my opinion a little bit about Tim when I recapped the Peacock version. I was like, Tim was one of the only voices I truly trusted in the entire documentary because, at least in the way that the Peacock documentary framed Tim and other friends of Diddy, Tim seemed like the one who, although he had had a good experience with him at certain points in his life and had obviously a great affection and love for Diddy, knowing him since they were children and living with him, um, it seemed like he also was acknowledging that he is just not that person anymore. And I feel like that was not the vibe I was getting in this documentary, which was very confusing to me. It was very confusing.
Yeah.
I was questioning then what Tim's intentions were. And I'm not sure if it's editing or I don't know, but like I wasn't getting the same impression that I was getting from Tim in this documentary in comparison to Peacock. So that gave me quite a bit of pause.
I agree. I agree that there was some like dissonance there. It was a little bit confusing of like what you said. What are the motives and where is the loyalty lie and like what is he getting out of? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's just strange and it was a little bit confusing to me as well. So I agree with you there.
And I think something to note, and okay, so I didn't even think I was gonna I didn't realize how much I was gonna have to reference the Peacock documentary, but I think I don't see a way not to because I mean, in the Peacock documentary, we we start with Tim at his house in the middle of the woods, right? And
Right.
he seemingly is living in the woods directly because he has tried to distance himself from Diddy and everything that comes along with Diddy. And it almost seems like he was afraid of retaliation and all these like different things. And I didn't get any of that in this documentary. Didn't even had no idea he's living in isolation, had no idea about all of these threats. Like, I don't know. I think that's a
Yeah.
really
It would
weird
be
thing.
nice to know, I guess, what the timeline was of like when these were filmed, maybe, and like
Yeah.
what the deal is. But yes, the it was different. He seemed different in both, so I didn't know when I was watching this one. I was kind of like, what is actually going on? But I'll take any information that you have, you know.
Right. I mean, he was definitely still consistent with giving us the crux of the backstory. Like, we do know that Diddy came from lifestyle, a background of privilege because his father, which okay, also okay, there was another discrepancy. so in the so in the Peacock documentary, when Tim is talking about Diddy's father, who was murdered, we don't know, allegedly by a kingpin. The kingpin that they talk about is not the same kingpin that they say in this documentary. The kingpin in the Peacock documentary was Nicky Barnes. That's who they were making it seem like he had ratted him out. That Diddy's dad Melvin, who was a drug dealer who worked underneath a kingpin, Nicky Barnes, sold drugs to an undercover cop. Then, in order to get out of trouble, ratted out Nicky. But then it seemed like they're alluding that he had connections to a different kingpin in Harlem that sold drugs, and that was Frank Lucas, which is actually the same person from the Denzel Washington movie. What's that movie? Where he plays a drug dealer. I think he played. Frankly, that's who he plays.
Oh, that's the guy. Yeah. I can't say that I know about that discrepancy because I feel like a lot of Diddy's family history is like convoluted and not very clear.
Yeah.
So like we have this general story of like his dad was connected and was a dealer allegedly and allegedly had ties to like mafia and that's
Hmm.
why he ended up getting taken out. But I don't know
Yeah.
Like when they mention those names, it's like how do we know, and how would he even know?
Right.
I guess except for information that he got from his mom, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I guess the details really don't matter. What we know is that Diddy definitely wasn't able to have a relationship with his father because he was murdered. By who? Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. But what we do know is that he provided before he left this planet, this earth, and set Diddy and his mother Janice up to have a comfortable life. And Janice was able to give Diddy the best of everything. At least that's what Tim articulates. And
Yeah.
I feel like for me, what I took away from both documentaries is Janice, to me, may be the origin of why Diddy is allegedly as violent as he is. They didn't talk about in this documentary all of the sexual things that both Tim and Diddy witnessed firsthand through parties that sound very similar to what Diddy would later on go and do himself, which would be labeled in those lawsuits as the freak offs. But they do highlight that she ruled with an iron fist, that she was the type of mom that was like, if somebody picks on you, you hit them back. And if someone takes your things, you better get it back or you're not coming in the house. Like, she was very, very much a tough lady and was not going to coddle Diddy. And I mean, I think that could be an insight into making him into the way he was or how he treated other people around him. What are your
Oh,
thoughts about
totally.
Janice?
Totally. I think that it was skipped over a little bit in this one about like some of the like alleged sex parties that she was having, or like the things that they were exposed to at a very young age, which was, definitely could have normalized that kind of behavior for him if you're young and witnessing those kind of things. And then also that Tim was saying that, yeah, his mom didn't want to hear like, oh, you're getting bullied. It sounded like she kind of knew that he was like a little bit weaker and getting
Hmm.
picked on, and she like didn't comfort him. She was like, get out there and hit back and be aggressive or I'll hit you, that kind of thing. And then I think it's also interesting that I believe it was Tim had mentioned that she was kind of she was like kind of bright and bubbly, and like people were drawn to her. And I
Hmm.
think that a lot of the women that he went on to hurt or allegedly hurt were kind of that profile of like they had a light and people were attracted to them and kind of the life of the party. And like
Yeah.
in my mind, it makes me think like, does he not like that? He wants to like take that away from women who like genuinely shine and are like talented naturally. And does that come from, his mom being liked by many? It sounds like the neighborhood and like all their friends. She has,
Right.
her own friends and that kind of thing. Um, does some of that hatred come from there? Who knows? But it's hard to not draw that parallel of
Yeah.
like, how do you get there? And then, how much of it's taught behavior, and
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
I think
I think that you're onto something with the correlation between maybe how he treats the women in his life and it stemming from possibly his mom. And it could be, and I think that I didn't really draw this connection until speaking with you, and then also thinking about some of the stuff that Tim was saying, and because he went a little bit more into detail this time about that she was physically abusive to Diddy, beating him and all these things. And I'm wondering if maybe it's like one of those things where he might be, and it's very clear that he loves his mother. He has a relationship to this day with his mom, but it could be one of those things where it's like a love-hate relationship, just like it is with maybe the women in his life. And maybe, I mean, I don't think that we haven't heard anything of him being abusive towards his mother, and maybe because he understands that pecking order, like you can never do that to your mother, and maybe he kind of takes out his aggression almost as if he's doing it to his mom, possibly. I'm obviously cannot diagnose anybody with anything, but I'm just trying to I'm just trying to do a correlation of why he is so angry towards women
yeah.
specifically.
I think, yeah, and I think that they do draw some parallels that like since he was very young, he's felt like powerless and that these actions are a way for him to like get power and control and feel confidence, you know, from
Yeah.
somebody who wasn't naturally like that and wasn't naturally like given respect. I think that I think that these documentaries just show that he like really uh you know, you can go one of two ways, and
Yeah.
he went very extremely in one way.
Yes, to say the least. Um, and then so then they again, like, they again, this documentary was really great at just kinda, like, giving us the highlight reel of his upbringing. So they talk a little bit about, you know, the fact that he didn't get to have that father figure, about the privileges that he grew up with. Then we go over to when he went to college, and he went to Howard University, and that's when we find where he finds his musical connection, and he starts doing the party promoting, and that's where all of this, his, like, what we know him now to be, that's where the origin story really seems to start, is at Howard University. And I didn't realize that he didn't graduate from Howard University. He had only went there for 2 years, and then, you know, later on when he became super successful, Howard did give him an honorary, do diploma. But
Right.
yeah, I didn't it's crazy to me that this man literally went to school for 2 years. He's like, "I know what I wanna do. I know what I wanna do. I'm gonna be a big music executive. I'm gonna be the biggest music executive." He's like 18, 19 at this time. Then he goes to New York City and he said, I'm gonna be like on your label," which would be Uptown, who Uptown is run by Andre Harrell, and he does it. He actually does it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, they said he was, yeah, ruthless about pursuing it, right? Like, he was, like, sleeping outside their offices, offering to
mhm.
do anything to get in that position, so but it is crazy that, yeah, how could he go there 2 years and then end up getting the honorary degree just for becoming successful? I don't know.
I know,
I thought that was really interesting.
and it's like, the thing is, we could be having a completely different conversation because all of this is making into an incredible story of an entrepreneur until we get to the violence of it all. And it's like you said, there's one of two ways you could have went, and he went the dark and disgusting route. And it's like, we could have been like literally having a different conversation had he just been a decent human being. Like, we could be like, that is so cool that you only
Right.
went to school for 2 years, and then you had an idea, you knew what you wanted to do, and you went after it, you worked hard, and you pursued it, and you achieved it. But it feels like there are a lot of bodies left in wake in order to get that, and then that's what makes you be like, sometimes
Oh,
the
yeah.
the fast way, there there is a reason why you got there so quickly. You stepped on a lot of people to get there. Um,
Right.
and 9 of those people, oh, actually, before we get to that, I which was not mentioned in the Peacock documentary, we find out the abuse of women like, started at Howard University, where
Right.
we get introduced to a person, they obscured their identity in the documentary, but they knew Diddy, and they witnessed firsthand him abuse his girlfriend at the time, like, literally beating her with a belt like, I don't wanna say like a child, but, like, at a certain time, like, in a certain time period, people did that to their children, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it felt like that's what he was doing, like he was reprimanding a child, and no one
Right, in front
intervened.
of people, like, in front of her friends, in front of people in the dorms, yeah, and it just seems like when we start hearing these stories, there were so many times that he could have changed the route, made a different decision. There was so many times that it should have just been the end or stopped there, and the fact that he was able to let these, even if they were smaller or bigger instances, go for so many years, that's, like, why this is such a huge deal now decades later, because this it apparently has been going on since what this would have been like the early 90s or
Yeah.
mid-90s, right? Yeah,
Even no,
mid-90s.
it was the early '90s. Actually, it might have been the late '80s because I
Yeah.
think that he started Bad Boy in, like, 91, something like that. Because I think, Tupac and Biggie died in, like, '96 or '97.
Okay, yeah.
So it was definitely early '90s for sure, but, like, It's so true. Like, there's so many times where he could, like, the destruction that he ends up allegedly doing could have been stopped. And I think that it seems like, from just watching a lot of true crime and, on abusers, these are like they test the waters. And I think moments like that, being able to publicly in front of people hit your girlfriend, and no one, and him see that no one, people were too stunned or whatever it would be to intervene, gave him, I think, the confidence to start escalating. And
Right.
yeah.
I think it emboldened, every time that happened, it emboldened him to be like, I can go further, I can do more. And I think that it was probably also a data point for him to know that young women, oftentimes were women in their very early 20s, are stunned by situations like that, and
Mhm.
don't know what to say or who to go to, and are a little bit it's not the same as like doing that to, I would say, a woman in their 30s, you know? I think he had the data point of like, this is the age range and I can kind of get away with that and they don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is just like some of the sick part of it too, that he was calculated. And a lot of people in this documentary talk about, they throw around the word genius a lot, but a lot of them are also saying that he was a master manipulator.
Mhm.
And, I think that even back then in his college days, that was a data point of like, "Okay, these young women, I can get away with that. What's
Yeah.
next?" You know?
Exactly.
And there were so many.
There's so many, and I think there's still many that we probably will never know about. This is a man that seems like he had an appetite that could never be fulfilled, and it just seems like he just kept wanting more and more and more. And so, he leaves Howard University, and then he goes and he gets involved with Andre Harrell, who is the um owner of Uptown Records, at the time one of the biggest record labels for hip hop artists. And, even though he starts at the bottom there, he quickly grows. He's actually we learn, is Mary J. Blige's, like, essentially mentor, the person that pretty much figured out how to make her marketable. And I think how you pronounce his name, Tor. I think his name is Tor. He's an editor for he's a hip hop editor, writer. And he's worked for Vibe and other affiliates. And I actually follow him on TikTok because he does a lot of different, like, he's seen a lot of stuff. So I was actually super excited that he was in the documentary. And I actually watched his series on Mary J. Blige. And oh my God, it was very eye opening because let me just tell you, Mary J. Blige, not very nice, according to him. Not very nice. And he met her when she was like a freshman in the industry. And I don't know, it kind of, to me, tells a story of what the culture was, especially during that time of like, so anywho, my main point is, it's just like, we're throwing these, like you said, we're throwing these terms like genius and all this stuff, but it's just like, I don't know, I don't think it's genius. I think that, yeah, there are talents there, but I think that there are people that were willing to do whatever it took, whether it be evil or not. And I don't think that's genius at
Right.
all. I think that's just
Manipulation, yeah, destruction. I think you're right, totally.
And then, so one of the biggest things that kind of catapults Diddy into another sphere is his promotion of this tragic event that happened at City College. It was a celebrity basketball that he co-chaired with Heavy D, an artist on Uptown. And it was supposed to be for a charity. A charity, I don't know what it was because they never mentioned what the charity was actually for. And I personally have thoughts that it was not for charity and it was for profit, and they just slapped a chair saying it was because the way they promoted it to me
Yeah.
it seemed like they were trying to make money. I don't know. And they never
Yeah,
mentioned
it was like a
specifically.
club promotion, but
Yeah.
for a basketball game, yeah.
Yeah. And some of the people that were supposed to be playing at this celebrity basketball game were like Jodeci, I think Boys to Men and LL Cool J. And they were so popular at that time. And I mean, they're still popular. People still listen to their music. I don't even think that a basketball game even was able to happen. I think that chaos and tragedy happened very quickly. But I mean, Diddy is good at promoting, and he promoted it so well that he allegedly oversold, and it caused essentially mass hysteria because people couldn't get in. And then it caused people to get trampled, it caused people to get suffocated, and 9 people lost their lives that day. The footage was really graphic and really sad. I can't even believe there
Yeah.
was so much coverage because it's the 90s. So I'm surprised we got as much coverage as we did.
Yeah, I am too. To see the film of it's so sad, and it, like a lot of people in the documentary said, it didn't have to happen. And they talk about how he never took really accountability for it. But he was held liable, and there was no criminal charges. But they
Mm-hmm.
kind of skipped over that he was held 50%. Him and Heavy D were held 50% liable,
Yeah,
and ended up paying like $40,000. But for 9 lives,
that's nothing.
shouldn't have happened. And then they said he went on to do interviews saying like he didn't oversell it, and
No
so
accountability
it's
at
just,
all.
but that's really when Diddy, I think that is when he really became like a public name. Like people
Mm-hmm.
knew his name because he was now involved in this celebrity thing that involved a court case. And this was kind of like, I wouldn't say what made him household name, but this is like what kind of got his people talking about him, which
Yeah.
is right off the bat, right from the beginning, it has to do with young people dying, which is just awful. And this is one of those events that it could have been stopped here. Like, hey, this guy did not promote this correctly. People died, you know, cut him loose. But somehow he was able to like go unscathed and keep building. And some of that is because he did know like how to build a brand and how to become influential before it
Mm-hmm.
was even really called that. So
I think this becomes a pattern with Diddy where he does something really egregious, something horrible, then gets a slap on the wrist, right? And then he rebrands himself. And that's how we get his first name change, which is
right.
I think that's when we get it. Is that when we get his? No, it's not actually. That's not.
Well, that's when he kind of, yeah, that's when his name is kind of made, right? So
Yeah,
that's when we get like the first version of him, which was his first version was a rebranding of like, I'm not a bad guy. I didn't oversell it. I'm going to be like a good guy
yeah,
now and do the right thing. Like a lot of people's first introductions to him was him being like, I'm going to be better.
yeah,
And then we just continue to get that for decades and decades of like you said, the rebrandings. Then he becomes Puff because he whatever incident that was after the club shooting,
yeah,
he became, I think, Puff, and which
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure we'll get into. But all these rebrandings of like, I'm going to do better now. And he had so much money at those times that he could have, he could have just chose to be like, I don't need to do that bad stuff anymore. But he
And it shows.
seems like he couldn't stop himself.
And it shows that it's like, I don't even think it's about the money. I think he loves the power, and I don't. And again, we can attribute it to his feeling lesser than or being picked on as a child and never wanting to be that or go back to that ever again. And I can't help, and I've made videos about this when it comes to like Justin Timberlake or J Lo, of why I they're in their flop era. Like obviously this is not incomparable of media perception as like Diddy, because that what he's done is on a different level. But it's one of those things. I attribute the fact that the reason why people are just now starting to learn about some of these celebrities that they once thought were great or had like were nice is the fact that they were able to spin this narrative without any pushback, without people like me and you sitting here chatting about it and being able to just boop, upload it. The process to get information out to people, which was much slower at that time. And I think that if we had social media like we do today, then he would have been stopped, because there would have been somebody who would have been like, no, I know him from here, and it would have spilled out quickly, and we would have stopped him earlier. So social media to me is so important and pivotal in catching these big fish that otherwise get to just swim around and eat people.
Totally, yeah. Before, they were completely in control of the narrative. It was just whatever they wanted to put out to the press is how they were going to be perceived, and the public just kind of ate that up back in the day. Like any photo shoots, I mean, back in this time, like if we wanted to see them or learn about them, we had to like turn on MTV and hope that there was like a clip of them
Yes.
it was not the same as being able to be like, hey, wait a minute, I can bring up these 3 interviews where he said this. It's just so different now. And that was a big part of how he made himself, was that he was smart enough to know how to curate himself to the media. And that just doesn't exist anymore in this day and age. So now we're seeing all these celebrities who used to run that game, which I think like Ryan Reynolds, J-Lo, like so many
Yeah.
of them, they just don't know how to play the game anymore. They're like so out of the loop. They have no handle on what is being published, and which is good because it means that we're getting authenticity. We're getting realness. We're not just getting what these celebrities want to serve us. So
I know. And they're trying desperately to reframe it. And it's just like, it's so funny. Again, I'm making the most wildest comparisons, but I just can't help myself. But it's just like those serial killers from like the 70s that never got caught, but like fucking DNA catches up with them, like this trail. It's like they've left these these bad behavior trails along the way. And then now we're at a point where people have nothing but time and energy to start like compiling all these things. And when you add it all up together, you're like, oh, this was with you the whole time. And now I'm putting it together and showing you that the person that we thought was you, or the persona that you wanted us to think, that is not actually you. You've been feeding us bullshit.
Right.
And we're
That was a
no
brand and a facade. Yeah.
And also our mindset has changed as a society. I've talked on here about, because again, you said you watch a lot of reality TV shows. I'm sure you probably watched his particularly. I watched the Making the Band.
Oh yeah.
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 And then like even other reality shows, like I've talked about Top Model. Did you ever watch Top Model?
Yes, yes.
So that was a time period where we were conditioned to think that in order to be successful in the entertainment industry, you had to, do things that most wouldn't. That's how you became a legend. That's how you became successful. And if somebody told you needed to lose weight, or you needed to change this about yourself, or you needed to go walk to Junior's from Manhattan to Brooklyn to get me a fucking piece of cheesecake, you better goddamn do it, because that's how you become the best rapper, singer, dancer, actor ever. Like, and we're like, yeah.
As if that was like work ethic. Yeah, like that was the work ethic that you needed to make it, which I don't know. I remember watching Making the Band, and that was probably, some of my first like really seeing Diddy like live in action on reality TV, which was another rebranding of his, of like, I'm going to be a good guy now and do this show and break into this new space. And I remember watching that as a young girl and thinking like, hey, he can't talk to those girls like that. Like, he shouldn't be saying that to her. And I think that was some of my interest with this case, is that I've always had that vibe from him of like, hey, he shouldn't be talking to girls that way. Even way back then on Making the Band, I remember clocking that and being like, what do you mean he's having Aubrey O'Day run farther? Like, she's beautiful, like what is happening here? But during that era of reality TV, we were very conditioned, and that was very much the norm of like, oh, haha, that's how you make it in the industry. And like, that's also just these celebrities, it was hard to tell if that was real Diddy, or if this was, oh, he's just playing it up for the show. Maybe he's not that mean, but he was, I mean, that was real. These accounts that we get from them, they were traumatized by what he was saying to them, so
yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's so interesting because they're having to, like, they're being filmed while this is happening, while they're being literally mentally abused by him. But they're like, they don't know what to do. This is their big break. And they're trying to almost make us feel comfortable with what's going on, as to not make the viewer uncomfortable. So like, later on, D Woods, who was one of the members of Danity Kane in making the band 3, that's where he put that band, that girl group together, which I loved, by the way. I love Danity Kane. I loved Danity Kane had their ring show stopping. We show. I loved it. And I think that was when I was clocking him the most. Like, I think I kind of like, I don't know, maybe because they were a rap group and they did the band, making the band, I was a little bit more like, whatever, go walk and get that cheesecake. I don't know why. But when he started being mean to the girls, I was like,
yeah.
Like, what's
yeah, like, hold up. Totally. That was kind of the point where I was like, hold on a second. All these girls, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
But
and then I also was like, I kind of always, and D Woods alludes to this in the documentary, I always did feel like Diddy had a crush on Aubrey, and that was why he was so mean to her. Like, it wasn't like, it was very clear that Aubrey was not, like, I feel like she may have been, and I hate to say this, but like a little, she's like a flirty like girl, like that's a part of her personality, not necessarily to Diddy specifically, but in general, right? And I think that he took that as, well, like, he was, I think he wanted to make Aubrey into one of those girlfriends, like a Cassie. And Aubrey is just not, that's not the type of person that's going to be like going down like that. And that's not to belittle anybody else that has, victim blame. That's not the case. It's just everybody has a different capacity and a different, like, you know what I mean? A different tolerance for their boundaries. And he tried to manipulate the audience into like Aubrey's boundaries, her being hard to work with. And that's so often what happens with women, especially in the workplace.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I think that kind of goes back to my theory of like very young, 20 something, very bright, naturally talented, super pretty. People are drawn to her just because of like who she is and how she presents herself. And I really think that there's something about that in women that Diddy like wants for himself. He wants them in possession, but he hates it at the same time, which is just like so dark.
I know. It's like, it's the same thing that draws him in. It's like this, it's like he wants, it almost feels like he wants to use.
Like he wants to be them.
Yes.
Or like,
and I mean, honestly, he has this thing where he like, it was not very common for a producer to be so in front of the camera. And they do talk about this. So like, going back to Uptown, like, you know, after he gets away with the City College incident, he then ends up being fired by Andre Harrell because they claim that Andre was just like, was a little too big to be at the label, because they still had a friendship after that. So they don't really go into like exactly the detailing, which is very interesting to me, but whatever. He gets fired from Uptown, and then guess who goes? And to me, I don't think he got fired. I think that Clive, because shortly after that, Clive Davis swoops in, who is immediately and scoops him up and just says, hey, you got your own label, 19, 20-year-old. Like, what the
yeah, that was super skipped over in this documentary, is his relationship with Andre Harrell and his relationship with Clive Davis. Both of those people were mentors to him and were people who gave him big opportunities and a lot of money. And I think it's interesting that they did not dive into those relationships at all. And I think it's worth looking into if it's something you're interested in. I would say that much. Like, I think there's something to be said that those are his mentors, and this is a big industry, and monsters are made. So
yes, I think that there is something there. And I mean, Andre Harrell died of what they say was cardiac arrest, which is, there's a whole conspiracy theory corner about all of that, which they definitely do not get into. But I mean, I kind of touched on it in the other recap. So if you're interested, you can listen to that. But for time, I don't want to keep repeating myself. So I'm just going to try to skip over things that I've already covered. But essentially, I do think that there was some collusion there. I think that it was these moguls, Andre Harrell being one mogul and Clive Davis being another mogul. I think that, and one of the reasons why I think Diddy kept early on getting away with things is, yes, he had, I think, a really, what would, I guess, in their opinion, maybe considered a good work ethic. Like he kept, like people keep on saying he kept going. He like pretty much, he was relentless. I would say that's not necessarily a good thing in his case. And then also he did have an eye or an ear for things, right? So for them, that's money. That's they're seeing money. They're seeing dollar signs. They don't care about if he's a good or a bad person, right? And I personally think, my theory is that Clive Davis was like, "Can I have him?" Like he
Yeah.
and I think that that is like what happened there, and that he gets passed on to an even bigger shark, being Clive Davis, and it's just giving him more clout, more power, and to continue to grow and be more monstrous. Like you're literally feeding the monster. And he starts Bad Boy. And off the bat is completely successful. One of his biggest artists is Biggie Smalls. Like a huge artist. And
Right.
that's when we start learning about the whole East Coast, West Coast beef. And I feel like that's when we start like the violence really starts getting turned up.
Yeah.
Did you know anything about that whole like East Coast, West Coast thing before like covering Diddy, or was that something that you learned on the way?
I remember at the time, like, knowing there's East Coast and there's West Coast, and it's a thing. I don't think until I started diving into it recently that I started to realize how serious that it was. You know, like, to me, early on and back in those days, it was like, "Oh, is that an entertainment thing? I don't really
Mhm.
know." There's not a lot of coverage. But when you go back and look at what was actually happening and the people who were lost during that time period, you start to realize that, okay, this was hip hop was becoming a business that was worth so much money. And
Mhm.
people are willing to do things for a lot less.
Yeah.
These people wanted to be millionaires, billionaires, and I really think that there's some of them were willing to do literally anything to get themselves in these places where they could become billionaires or millionaires.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it surprises me a little bit, when you start going down the line of like who around him is gone and all that. You start to realize, oh, this was actually like a mafia.
Like,
I don't know if I can say that.
I
Like,
mean, a
this
little
was a
bit.
huge industry. There was so much money involved that I think that some of these people were willing to do anything. And that's just like my own gut feeling and personal opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know anything. But after looking into it more, I think that people underestimate the fact of like how much money was involved and that people were willing to do a lot of things to get to the top of this business that was like just starting to really boom. So
I mean, yeah, honestly, they even make something new in this particular documentary that I found so interesting is when they go to the part where the one club promoter like simply like was wearing, I guess at the time, so I didn't know this, but I guess Suge Knight, who was like, I guess the head of the East Coast portion of the rivalry, so he was like the Diddy for Death Row. Like, you know what I mean? Like like you have the
yeah, yeah,
Diddy Bad Boy, Suge Knight, Death Row, and those are the two forces. That's who we're going against, right? And I guess they they were trying to make a power move, and I did not know this until this documentary. And they were trying to they were trying to I guess do a monopoly and beat both East and West Coast, which I think ignited something that I had no idea about. And
bigger. Yeah.
so there's this poor party promoter guy, right? And someone from Death Row comes with a white shirt that just in a very small lettering says Death Row, like East Coast or something, or yeah,
Yeah.
East Coast or something like that. And he's like, whatever, I'll put it on. Somehow Diddy sees it and chases him down in a car and starts allegedly chases him down in a car and allegedly starts shooting at him, to the point where he's like he barely escapes it. Like he said, he's jumping curbs, he's going in on medians. Like it's insane. And this is over him simply wearing the wrong shirt. So that really goes to how deeply rooted. And I think so. I do agree with you.
Right. Like how real it was that wasn't like entertainment, that this was like a real
Yeah.
war to them, and that it was about territory and money. A lot of money was involved. And I think yeah, I didn't realize that they were doing the like trying to take over the East Coast. But you would think like, oh, it's just music, you know, everybody, there's all kinds of different labels and there's all kinds of, but this was, I don't know, hip hop was just starting to become, I think, like worth so incredibly much that all of these people were trying to like grab it for themselves, and it became vicious.
It did.
Is what it sounds like.
And again, to make this genre, or to make it as big as it was becoming, again, it feels like people got stepped on, literally. Like, we get the City College incident that we lost 9 lives. Then guess what? We lose 2 of hip hop's biggest legends, Biggie and Tupac. And it just becomes at what point, what how worth it is it? And apparently for some people at the top really profiting, these lives are just I feel like almost a number on a spreadsheet. They don't seem like they value life. They value only the money. And they're still profiting off of these people, and they haven't been here for 20 plus years.
Right. Yeah, just all of the damage that's been done along the way. There's so much of it, and it goes back to like, why wasn't that the end? Why didn't someone stop it then? But then we go on, and we have the was it Steve Stewart that showed the that music video of him on MTV. He didn't like the
Oh, yes.
and he goes and
Steve
beats
Staub.
that
Steve
guy up.
Staub. Yes,
Steve Staub, yeah, that's right.
the music video with
And
Nas.
it's like, these weren't even people who were like putting out hit pieces on him, or like this was just something that he filmed and didn't like the final result, and it got aired, and he went and beat this guy up. Like another instance of like that could have been the end, but again, he was unscathed.
I can't, and you know what it is? It's because it's like, and I forgot to mention this earlier, because like in the beginning there was one of the let me see what her name was. She worked for Vibe, and she was an editor for Vibe.
Reporter.
Yeah, she was she was an editor for Vibe, and she said that they shot Diddy for the cover with like angel wings, and he, it seems like it was image has been a through line of something that we repeatedly hear about Diddy that was super important to him. His image, and he wants full control of what his image looks like. And when he was unable to get access to see what was going to happen, he literally threatened her, and to the point where this woman has blocked it out, she said, and had to be retold what happened to her, where they had to literally take the proofs from that shoot and get her out of the office, because Diddy came allegedly with people to make good on the threats that he said to her over the phone, which he had to issue an apology letter to her, and she didn't pursue it any further and went on to still work with him, which blew my mind, which I was like, wow, like it almost feels like people's threshold for tolerance of being spoken to or treated in a certain way were so high back at that time. And then going back to Steve Staub, like they did file charges, but yet still only had to go was it 1 day of anger management?
1 day. Yeah, 1 day of anger management. Which are like, those stories are unbelievable, because like I said, these weren't like people putting out hit pieces on him. Like these were things that he was involved in. He was involved with that cover shoot. He was involved with this music video, but he understood how important his image in the media was, and he was willing to do anything to make sure that it was told the way that he wanted it, which shows us like how much control these people had over the narrative and how much power he already had in the industry, where she felt like, I have to let this go, the Vibe recorder, to be able to get into these parties and to be able to be on the radio. And that's, I think, how it continued so many years too, is that people felt that they had to be silent, which is such a sad thing.
It's a horrible thing, and we keep and I feel so bad because it's like it's so easy to say, well, like, this is what I would do. This is like, if I was put in this situation, I don't know what I would do. Because at the end of the day, it's like one thing is like, okay, I can try to speak up for myself and against someone who is way more powerful than me, and my career is over. And it's not being dramatic. He had the power to do that. He really truly
Right.
did. And it's very clear from the public abuse that he showed that he would be backed. It's been proven.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
Right.
not it's absolutely would have happened. And it's like, why should I already had this one thing happen to me that's horrible. Why should all the things that I worked hard for be stopped because of this person and his actions towards me? So it becomes of like, do I stop doing my passion to expose him or to try to expose him when it might not even work? Or do I just like try to put that aside, compartmentalize it, and track on and just try to make the best I can out of a really horrible situation? It doesn't seem like there is no winning in that
No.
situation.
No, people were afraid that they would lose everything, you've already now been victimized, and then to think that you could lose everything you worked for or everything you want, uh, it's just unbelievable that he was already in a position of that much power, um, and then he just went on to do more, and I think that the public backing him was seen in, I don't know, maybe we'll get to this later, but in the club shooting where Natanya was shot in the face, the public backed Diddy and was, like, saying inappropriate things about her on the radio and saying that
That was
he shouldn't be testifying, and he had a lot of public backing in that case, which is just
that was
it's different
disgusting.
times now. Yeah, it's
First of
just unbelievable now.
it is unbelievable to even think that at any point would be, like, acceptable. Sh It's not even it was it was very clear she was a victim of a shooting, right? And for anybody to start making fun of her because she was a victim of being shot square in her face, I can't, like, I kinda wish we could find those radio station people, and I wish, like, I'm sure
Right.
that they tried to or tried, because it's like, I wanna know, I want you to answer for your behavior at that time. Like, what was going through your mind to literally tell people to come and, like, uh, write in or call in to publicly ridicule and shame a victim of gun violence, a survivor
Yeah.
of gun violence? But I honestly think, like, I want someone I people of the internet, they're really good for this. I kinda do want them to be like Game of Thrones, like, shame, shame, because that's fucked up. That's really fucked up. She was already going through a lot, and also how brave it was of her to let's just go to the New York club shooting, because that's a huge another huge thing that, again, there should have been another stopping point for this man. So, okay, so Diddy, he's rebranded. He's now, well, Biggie and Tupac, the whole East Coast, West Coast situation comes to an end when both sides lose their big artist. And then Diddy goes into the next chapter of rebranding where he kind of becomes, I think, the fancy version of Diddy, right? He right. He's like now he's yeah, put like puffed out. Yeah, like, so now he's like, it's all about suits, it's all about, it's he's more of, like, it seems like a legitimate, like like a Clive Davis, but for the hip hop community, right? And so now he's dating Jennifer Lopez. And this is what I was saying earlier, where in both documentaries, like, I think they did give me more than the Peacock version, but because they completely gloss over the J-Lo era in the Peacock documentary, but pissed me off. Um, but because that always fascinated me, that whole situation. Like, J-Lo was a part of this incredibly crazy club shooting in New York. It was, what was the club's name? It was, I can't remember the name. I think it's Club New York. It yeah, it is, it's Club New York. It's yeah, there was a shooting that got huge headlines because I still don't quite understand why it escalated to where it escalated, because it just seemed like a crowded club, and then they just got annoyed, and then they just started shooting. That's literally, that's how they made it seem. I'm like, what got us there? Like, why did we decide that we needed to shoot in the club to because I don't know. I was very unclear about that. I'm still unclear about what got us to such violence. But so J-Lo, Diddy, and his newest artist at the time, which the artist's name was Shine, they go to a Club New York, and they're in VIP. I think it was just essentially people trying to show who's bigger and badder. I think that's probably what happened. And they decided, Shine allegedly and Diddy decided that they were going to show them who was bigger and badder, and they opened fire allegedly. And this, an innocent bystander, which was, what's her name? Is it Natanya? Yes. Yeah, Natanya. And this is coming from Natanya's account. She says that she saw it happening. It almost seems like it was like slow motion. And she said something, she says a spirit called to her and said, just be still, you are going to get hit. And that is what happened. And she literally sees it happen. And she says she sees who did it. And although they try to say it's Shine, because Shine is the one who ends up getting the conviction, and she says she knows it was Diddy. She saw who did it, and she testified to that. And that's when, that's when the smear campaign starts happening on her, and they try to discredit her. And allegedly Diddy pays people off to kind of, I think, confuse the jury, taint the jury. And he ends up winning. He ends up being acquitted of all charges.
Right. Yeah. Something that they skipped over a little bit in this documentary is Shine was like a young, new person that he had just signed on the label who was at the club with them that night. And Natanya's story has always been that she saw from her own account that Diddy had pulled out the gun and was the one that shot her. She's always said that from the beginning. But when they went to trial, Shine's defense team, his lawyers, were on bad boy payroll previously. So Diddy hired, saying, oh, I'm a good guy. I'm the good guy. I'm going to get your defense team. I'll get you lawyers. I'll set you up. But then Diddy went in there and his defense ended up calling the witness, which was this this woman who was a security guard in the club that night. And that security guard went on the stand and testified. That was like the most damning witness to Shine, who was called by Diddy's defense, who said that she fell on Diddy. So she knows that Diddy didn't have a gun and that it was Shine. And that's why he ended up going away. And there's a really good interview that he does from, I think it's Clinton Correction. You can look it up, but Shine did like a whole interview kind of about that, how his team was hired and how he really felt like he should have a retrial because of that conflict of interest. And I think that's like a huge thing that was a little bit glossed over in the documentary. But yeah, so now we have another one of these events that was like that could have been the end. And that woman who was the security guard who said she fell on Diddy, I think she also testified, or she was also the one that Natanya said that night when she came into the club. Natanya had like a comb on her that was like, had a pick on it or something. And that comb was
like a rat tail comb.
Yes, exactly. That comb was taken away from her at the door. They said, you can't bring this in. That's a weapon. And then according to Natanya, she was just like, so I couldn't bring a comb in that night, but they got in with those things. Like, how does that work? And what does that mean about that security guard? So there's some questions there about that whole
That's
trial.
true. And to that point, I mean, I would have to look into it. I'm not sure, maybe you can answer this question for me. Would that have then made the club liable for that? Because then that means they didn't check him.
Right.
Which would be what not.
Yeah, you would think that would have came up in the trial. I don't know that that's something that she said when she testified. That was something that she said when she started doing some more like news interviews, probably last March, kind of after like this Cassie settlement. She started doing some bigger interviews, and that was something that I clocked that she said, that she just mentioned, like, hey, I didn't get in with my comb that night, but he got in and I was shot, and it's just interesting that that's the same security guard that testified against Shine and against her account. So just something to be noted that wasn't in the documentary.
And it's interesting too, like I think it's so unfair because then the driver of Diddy, who ended up testifying against Diddy, who says that Diddy tried to because he was the person that drove J-Lo, Diddy, and maybe Shine to the club. And he's the one who was the getaway, unbeknownst to himself, driver. And then they all got detained once they couldn't evade the police any further. And he says that on the way to the club, he saw that gun in Diddy's hand. And he's saying that on fleeing from the club after the shooting, the door was open. And that's when he realized he had tossed the gun, allegedly. And then when they all got detained, the driver is alleging that Diddy then bribed him with, I believe it was $50,000, and then said that, like, he would give him his diamond pinky ring, which was valued at $300,000 as collateral to make good on the promise. And I think at first I was confused if he took the bribe, and then I realized he did take the bribe in the moment, I guess, maybe, or like said that he would, but then kind of did the like bait and switch, and it ended up being the person to testify against Diddy at trial. But again, like Diddy had a really powerful team behind him, and the driver who had firsthand knowledge of him before and after and during the arrest was discredited. The person who was the victim, who said that they saw what happened, was discredited, but yet this random ass security guard can say, I tackled him, so it's all good.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it is. It's wild.
That is so crazy to me.
That part of the story is wild. And another part of that crazy story is that when they did get pulled over, they were chased 11 blocks. The cops pulled them out of the car and told them all to put their hands on the hood. Jennifer Lopez just started walking away, allegedly. She just started walking away and was like, I'm going to go home. Like she was just unbothered by all of that.
Then he said, I'm going to go down the block.
Yeah, I'm not involved. I'm going to go. And I think that's crazy. I don't think that she will have any repercussions for being involved in it, even though there was some speculation that she could have been the one that was like holding it for him.
I heard that one too.
And
I heard that one too.
There are stuff in the Cassie documents that say that she was like made to do stuff like that, possibly. So it's possible, but I think because there was just injuries and there were no deaths in that situation, I don't think Jennifer Lopez will get pulled back into it. But it is crazy that she was like involved. I think that there is a statute of limitations since nobody died, since it was injuries. So even if they could prove that, I don't know that she would face anything. But I mean, it's crazy how many people are coming out and talking like this driver and everything. So who knows? Who knows what could happen?
I was wondering if when this whole trial starts, if she was going to get subpoenaed to testify, and I still think that it's a possibility. To your point, the statute of limitation, maybe it won't be because of the club shooting from '99, but again, we know that there is a lot of surveillance that they pulled from the raids from Diddy's homes. So, and we know that there are a lot of notable people on these said tapes, these alleged tapes. So possibly, I don't know, she for a different reason could be brought in that we're not even privy to yet. I don't know. But again, it's not as if like we said before, these behaviors, these things that he had been doing allegedly had started before J-Lo. So it's very possible that there are some things that she got recorded doing that may make her have to be pulled as a witness. I don't know.
Right.
I would be interested to have her get deposed because I feel like she's never had to answer for any of it. So I would be interested if that ends up happening.
Yeah, me too.
I know she'll fight it. She'll walk away.
Yeah, I'm going home.
And I will like to say that Johnny Cochran has a very special place in hell for all of the people that he's defended and gotten off. Like, he pisses me off. Like, literally, I didn't even realize Johnny Cochran was one of Diddy's lawyers for that. God, of course he was. I'm like, why? Like, sir, like, why? Like, if you don't already know, Johnny Cochran, and he's the very famous lawyer who got OJ off. If it don't fit, the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Like, this fucking man. Like,
Yeah,
I
of
can't. I
course.
cannot. He's one of the people that help, like, continue to, like, why didn't it stop there? People like Johnny fucking Cochran, like,
Well, and
defending these people.
hiring him is a little bit telling too, because he understood like what kind of defense he needed and what kind of person he was and who he needed fighting for him. I think that's a little bit telling.
It's actually, you're right. It's very telling. It's very, very telling. So yes, so we're seeing, and then after, that's when we get another name change, and I think that's when he becomes like P Diddy, and he's trying to distance himself from, like, being a thug, quote unquote, or like it's all corporate from here, and that's when we
Yeah.
get all the brands.
Yeah.
Like, we getting all the brands now. We got Ciroc, DeLeon,
Sean
he gets, and then
John.
he.
Yeah.
Yes, Sean John, like, and they make a really good point that you didn't have to listen to any of the music that Diddy produced to have the reach that he did with his brands, and which I, again, put him into another stratosphere. Like, they're like, the dad from Middle America was wearing Sean John. He might not have listened to any of the music that he produced, but he sure as hell was wearing it to mow the grass. Like,
Right.
that's true. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Totally. It was like,
And
he was good at, he understood like branding and building out a brand before that was really a thing. I mean, he was almost pioneering it, kind of like a Martha Stewart. Like, she was branching out into all of those too and being like, I'm clothing and I'm this, and that wasn't I don't think that was like super heard of in his time.
yeah. Yeah, what happened is they just got in early. They were just the
Right.
first to do it. And, and I think that, again, that's why people want to call him a genius. But I hate to, like, call these people geniuses, because it just inflates their ego. And I think that it's one of the driving forces of why they become the people that they become. And I don't want to feed into it, but, like, yes, sure. It was a great business move, clearly. But it does show that, again, like, the moves that he made with every step, bigger people. Like, so you start out with Andre Harrell, small fish. Then you get a shark, Clive Davis, and then I don't even know I don't know, a Zeus with
Well, when
that
he
one
got involved
company.
with the alcohol companies, that was
That's what I'm
like, they
saying.
paid him out
$1 billion
Yeah, $1 billion. That's
with a B, guys, with a B.
that's a big industry to get involved in.
That's dangerous when you get to that type of money, because that's like a number that I don't think anybody can really wrap their head around. Like, it's like almost like a pit that you'll never get to the bottom of. So it emboldens him to be able to, like, I think this is when he starts getting looser, which ends up backfiring on him, because then I think he starts getting a little bit, like, messy, sloppy.
Right.
I think I think that's when the drugs start to come into play a lot. We start hearing that he starts, introducing a lot of drugs. And I think that because he had so much money now, I think he felt like, okay, if I get into trouble, I can just pay my way out of it. That's what I've always done. And I didn't even have as much money then. You're really not going to be able to do anything. But he told on himself, essentially. He went too far. He recorded everything.
Yeah, right.
I think he signed his own death certificate, essentially. Like, had he not done all of that, like, he probably still would be getting to get away with all of what he was getting away with for so long. Like, they wouldn't have been able to,
Right.
like, again, like, for example, like in the New York club shooting, like, there was no surveillance, you know what I mean? So, like, it's just everybody's word. But now we have all this footage and stuff like that. Now, like, when so we go to, like, what kind of kicks all of this off is when BET gives him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023, right? And everyone thought it was very fucking weird that he would thank Cassie, and it was like, didn't seem loving. It didn't seem like, thank you to my, partner at the time. We were not together anymore, but I still appreciate our time, and she helped me to be able to achieve something for those 10 years we were together. No, it seemed like a threat. He was saying
Totally.
something, but his tone felt very threatening. Like,
Yeah.
and this is what people are saying triggered Cassie to file the lawsuit that she ended up filing later that year. And so they start that episode there. So then we get to how it goes to your point, how he even got with Cassie in the first place. He met Cassie when she was 19.
Yeah, she was a teenager, a literal teenager.
Yeah, like that's crazy. And at that time, so he was still like, I think he had to have been in his like either he had
Late
probably, no,
30s.
40s. He was definitely in his 40s. Yeah. And so Cassie is this 19-year-old. She has a boyfriend at the time, and she's signed to Bad Boy, and she releases her freshman album, self-titled Cassie, with one of her hit songs. I remember when that video premiered, I loved it.
Me
I was
too.
obsessed, like Me and You.
Yeah.
I loved that
love
video. I
that
still do.
song. Yeah.
And the album did really, really, really well. And so everyone like is like, okay, like she's about to blow up.
Yeah.
But then crickets, nothing ever happened again with her. And I guess I don't, because there were so many other, artists out at the time. Music was like popping at that time that I don't think I necessarily noticed that we never heard from her again, because she was still around. We still saw her, but I guess I was like, well, because we haven't heard any.
But she became like the side character. And I remember at that time wondering, like, why don't we get to know more? Because again, this isn't a time where you have to turn on MTV or something to get content from these people. It wasn't like you could check if she's posted on Instagram and I remember feeling like,
Yeah,
why is that it? Like what happened to that? And this, when they mentioned it in this documentary, it was kind of like an epiphany to me of like, oh, that's what happened, is that she really could have been super successful. She had what it took. She was really talented, and she was shelved by this man who wanted so much power and control. And that's how I feel about it. Just the fact that, like we said, she was a literal teenager. When you're young like that, I don't know. You don't know how to navigate a man in his late 30s, early 40s who has all of this money. And by this point, I think he really did consider himself like untouchable, right? Am I frozen? Can you hear me? Am I frozen? Hello. Can you hear me? You can't hear me?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
That was so weird. That was so weird. It didn't even like freeze for me. I was just gone.
Oh, were you able to see me the whole time?
Yeah. That was so
Oh
weird.
my
Like,
God, that's crazy.
I didn't get kicked out. I was just like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I don't know what happened.
No,
there.
you were completely gone. I didn't. I was like, oh, I was because it's happened a couple of times. So it just goes on to me, and then I'm like, if I just wait, you come back.
Weird. Okay.
I feel like it's something to do. This hasn't happened before, but I'm gonna reach out to the support team. I'm wondering if it's a them situation, but it hasn't happened before.
Or maybe because
since I've been using this.
Maybe because I'm like doing it on the app. I don't know.
Oh, maybe it's possible. Maybe their app is not like strong enough or yet.
I don't know.
But we're almost done. So
weird. I'm
hopefully,
sorry. Hopefully that was the last.
Oh no. Please do not apologize, because also like technology is stupid.
Yeah. We do the best we can.
Right? But I think we were just talking about essentially it. You made such great points of this is definitely a pattern. He targets people in a certain age range, and Cassie's a teenager at this point, and we didn't really talk about some of his other exes, like his first girlfriend, who he had his first son with, and then Kim Porter. But there is a pattern with all of his major relationships where he likes this person, he takes them, but then once he has them, he wants to belittle them. He wants to, I think it's a way to break them. Like he love bombs them, right? That's his MO. He love bombs them. He hooks them in so they have something to hold on. Like, I know him in a certain way. And then he does the bait and switch, and he then degrades them. And he does this in front of people too. Cause I think that's part, I think he loves he loves an audience, I think.
Yeah.
And it's so sad that he got to Cassie and took such a good portion of her youth. That's so sad. And what we find out from people who were around and witnessed firsthand this abuse that he did to Cassie, and also it's like he beating her, like going, like they came from a club and he starts beating her in the car, and then they go into the apartment and he continues to beat her, and then like when he's done, he just sends her away to a hotel to heal up, and then fetches her when she's all healed up, and then they go on to a like to do appearances. And she has to hide all this.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's so bad. And the things that are detailed in her claims are so devastating that when you read through those, it makes it clear that this is not, that it wasn't just like a DV situation, and not that any like domestic violence, any situation like that is a big deal and is wrong. But you could tell by what she was saying in her claims that this was what they went on to charge him with, organized crime. Like, there were people involved, there were witnesses, there were,
Yeah.
this was something that he was good at and knew what he was doing, and it wasn't the first time. And that is so clear in the claims that she had, I think, of just like the way that he orchestrated it, and it's horrible.
And that's a really good point. Like, similarly to R. Kelly's case, which they briefly mentioned, there were, in order for the things that were listed in the lawsuits, like Cassie, and the things that R. Kelly then later got convicted of, you have to have a lot of help, a lot of assistance, right?
People,
And yes, there are some people. Yeah, people know. People stay quiet, and there are a host of different reasons why people do that, and sometimes I can be empathetic or understanding of why maybe somebody didn't intervene, and then sometimes you're like, no, you're just as bad. You need to be held responsible as well. It's not necessarily a black and white thing, and you have to, like, context is important, but
right. Well, and I think that this documentary kind of shined a light on the fact that he was surrounding himself with people in that young female demographic in every aspect, because he knew that he could like manipulate and control easier. Like, his chef was a young woman, and a lot of these people who were also witnessing it were also young women who didn't know what to do in those circumstances.
Yeah, and the thing is, for me, like, especially the only woman I think that I heard in the documentary that knew about it, or was around, that maybe didn't intervene, that I was like, I could understand, like, the chef and the makeup artist, all those people, because it's scary. Like, what are you supposed to do, right? If he can do it to her, nobody cares. He absolutely certainly can do it to me, right? The only person, and we haven't heard from her firsthand, so this is just from what we got from the Peacock documentary, what we've gotten from this documentary. It was his chief of staff, Christina.
Yeah.
She really reminds me of
Yes,
what's her name?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine
That was my
Maxwell.
first
Where
thought.
Right, and that she seems, at least the way they portray her, to be very complicit, very much not caring. It wasn't like, I don't know what to do. Like it seemed like she was very much like
I
orchestrating
know
these
what
plans
to do.
and
Yeah.
assisting him.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
like, oh, I know how to cover this up. Like, almost
Totally.
encouraging. Like,
I
you know what I
thought
mean?
the text messages that his old assistant shows, and some of them were from her orchestrating those parties, that was diabolical. I mean, that when I
Yeah,
saw that, I was like, oh, she hasn't been talked about enough. I don't think I've heard this name come up as much for how much this documentary portrayed her as like his Ghislaine Maxwell, really. I mean, she was
yeah.
in charge of everything. I think she was the chief of staff, right? Was her like
Yeah, she was
technical?
the chief. Yeah, and so, like, for the assistant, his name is Phil. That's where we end on, which we're gonna get to very soon. But, like, a person like Christina, who holds such a high power over so pretty much we can say, I would say she's like the second in command when it comes to the organization of Diddy, right? So all of those employees underneath, she is directly over, right? And if she is okay with what's going on, the behavior that's going on, they certainly must fall into line, because if they speak up, that's it for them. And that could not just mean for them as employment; it could be it for them with retaliation, with violence.
Right.
So it's like, what do you do? Do you continue to get the party supplies for him to do these freak offs? Do you, like, what? How do you? It does. Oh, it does feel like the mafia, like you said earlier. It does feel
Yeah.
like a gang where it's like maybe you didn't mean to join the gang, but you're in the gang,
Now you're
and
a
you know the
soldier, yeah.
only way, and you know what happens when you try to leave a gang.
Right, yeah. I think
I
there's
don't know
just so many victims, so many of those people who did get caught up in it, and it's just amazing how much power he was able to, like, hoard to himself. It's
how much
just
fear.
yeah. Yeah, people I mean, I think a lot of these people were actually afraid of not just violence, but being, like, taken out or being got, you know? They didn't know what he was
Yeah,
capable of, which is these are people who have had real life interactions with him, and that's the feeling that they were getting, and that's tells us what we need to know about him, I think.
yeah. I mean, I've met Diddy it before. Um,
Really?
I won't. Yes, I won't say where because I have an NDA. But I will say this: nothing crazy happened or anything like that. I don't like, but I I can speak to, and it was a brief interaction of because I'm a server and I've worked in many restaurants like in New York and all over, right, and in LA. And so I've run into celebrities all the time. But I once served Diddy a long time ago, and I made a joke because I joke with my tables all the time, and that one moment, that viral moment from that reality show singing competition that he had a few years ago, where that guy, like, they're doing like that stare off because
Yeah.
they're doing this like stare off thing, and that literally happened to me when I made this joke about water, and I literally the way he stared at me, I literally, like, I was like, "Oh my god, I should not have joked with him." And then it felt like 10 minutes went by, and it was probably just a minute, and he was like, you're funny," and I was like he was like, "You're an actress?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, yeah, you know, you're funny," and that was literally the moment, but I just remember just, like, the energy in the sense of, like, I didn't, like, feel, like, in danger by any means or anything like that, but I could he does have this, like,
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, shit," like, you're like, "Oh," like, you do have this, like, I
Oh,
was so intimidated in that moment, and again, I wanna be very clear, I did not feel like he was threatening me or anything like that, but it's just going to the, like, he has an
yeah, how
energy, and that was a brief
crazy
moment I had.
that is
Like,
crazy
just a
that that
brief
energy
moment.
is, like, palpable. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't imagine when there is something super serious happening, like, what that how intense he must really be. And so, it and the documentary goes into a lot of details with a lot of other accusations, like, a lot of, with, uh, the one, a lady, her name is Talia, who said that she was, raped by Diddy, drugged, allegedly drugged by Diddy, and then, sounds I don't wanna go into
Horrific.
details. They do it in the documentary, so when you watch it, she'll recount it. But it was really graphic, and to the point where she says that she didn't wanna report it. She didn't wanna tell her family, the shame that came with it. She lived with and then also she had a lot on the line. She was going through a divorce and a custody battle, so she she wanted to say something, but the fear of what she could lose was too great. And so she ran away from it for a while to protect her mental health, to protect her peace. And it wasn't until Cassie, who opened the floodgates for all of these people that he has stepped on to get to where he want to the money, to the greed, to the power, and that he thought that he could continue to silence. When Cassie was brave enough because of that moment, that fucking moment at the BET Awards, and she said no more, and she filed that lawsuit, it gave those people who felt like they wouldn't be believed or felt like they were alone and felt like they were the only one, the courage, the voice to tell their story. And I am so happy Cassie was able and brave enough and felt safe enough to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So much credit to her because that is that is what opened those floodgates for people like, what's her name? Natalia or Talia in the documentary?
Talia.
She talks about how she didn't know she thought she was the only one, you know? She didn't know that there were other victims, which I guess why would you assume? And so when she found out, you know, there are others and it's just crazy and to see also I think a big part of it is that they were so young. They were very young, and then getting past that
Mhm.
and looking back and to realize, like, hey, that person changed the trajectory of your entire life by his actions.
Yeah.
I think that um has a lot to do with these people realizing, like, hey, it wasn't okay then, and it was too scary to report then, but now I'm glad that
Yeah.
there were some safeguards in place, because if New York hadn't made that policy that kind of
Oh, the walk
negated that,
back was
yeah, that people could file those back claims without that statute of limitations, without that happening, none of these people would have felt safe to do that. So it's huge.
it is huge. And, you know, to wrap up the documentary, the 5 parts, we kinda the assistant, that was, like, the shortest part, the 5th episode, which I think it was a perfect amount because it honestly, all I feel like the button that we needed was the confirmation, and so Phil, which was Diddy's assistant, he pretty much validates everything that's detailed in Cassie's claims, like the drugging her, the allegedly drugging her, the filming her, because at some point, and then finding out that he was filming everything, filming everyone, right? And at one point, a tape gets misplaced, gets lost, gets stolen. We don't really know. He's panicking about it, and then like the parties, like he's one of the people getting the party supplies, and then also we find out that again through manipulation, through targeting, through grooming, he it seems like a tactic of his is to kind of make sure that he can control you by like making you do something bad, right? And he says that he felt like pressured to have sex with one of the sex workers that Diddy provided. And he says that the woman consents to it, but it doesn't seem like he wanted to do it. It felt like he was coerced or pressured into doing it, and felt immediate regret, shame, and all of the things. And he says that he is very religious. And then again, like that's again like, and I'm sure Diddy knew that. And I think,
Right.
and you know, right? And
He understood the
it's
shame, and that people, I mean, the more he did it, I'm sure the more he learned that people aren't so apt to share when you victimize them like that, and the shame and all that
yeah,
that comes along with it. And I think that was something that he was aware of. And it wasn't just women. It was like that happened to the assistant and Little Rod,
Little
who was
Rod,
also in there, and he had made claims that he had shown Little Rod videos of Stevie J. And so there's just,
yeah.
it's so widespread, and it's not just women, and he really, it seems like, had this down to a science, which is just crazy.
That's actually a really great way to put it. It did seem like he perfected his formula, and it was at a certain point he was. And I hate to equate it down to something so simple, but it seemed like he came up with his perfect formula of how to get away with all of the depraved things that he wanted to do, all his crimes, right? And it was just plugging it in, and it didn't matter who it was, and it didn't matter. That's what also really scares me about this whole thing, that it wasn't just women, it wasn't just men, it was like, it was almost felt like anybody could be a victim of him. It was just like hoping that you were not in his path when he was decided to turn into the monster. And it seemed like that was something that people, like there was a switch in him, like when he decided, like, because he could be charming and he could be nice, which is why again these type of people get away with it. But there's then that you get introduced to that other side, and it's scary. It's a scary side that you don't want to see.
Totally.
And sometimes people don't get to live to even tell their story, which we have clearly seen throughout the years and throughout this documentary. And also, I'm so happy that people are banding together, because there is power in numbers. Yeah, power in numbers. And Phil is going to be one of the people testifying
Yeah.
before the grand jury.
Yeah.
And so I'm really happy, and I think this is the we keep talking about like, well, this should have been the thing that stopped him, and I don't. I hope I'm not being gullible. I hope I'm not. I want to be optimistic because I want to put good energy out there. I think this is the time. I think this is the one
Yeah.
that's going to get him and stop him.
I think things have caught up to him, and just the way that he continued to do it. I mean, the text messages that the assistant's showing at the end, some of those are from like 2021. I mean, this is Diddy was a man in his 50s still doing this stuff, which it was never okay, but the fact that he really thought he was untouchable enough to just continue, and they're talking about it becoming like a daily basis thing, uh, it
Yes.
wasn't going to stop until somebody said, "Hey, let's put all these pieces together and put an end to it." So I would be surprised. I would be surprised if he gets out. I think that's just like my feeling towards it. I would be surprised if he
Yeah,
is ever out
I think at
again.
this yeah, I think at this point, and I feel like more optimistic because usually, like as we covered, he gets out of trouble pretty easily, slap on the wrist most of the time and very quickly. Even with the Shine uh uh New York shooting club thing, I know that did last probably about a year or so, maybe less than that. This has been going on for a couple of years now. It doesn't like I can't even believe it really has been. And he's tried like 3 or 4 times at this point to get out on bail and not gotten anywhere close. He's gotten reprimanded since then for like allegedly tampering with evidence or lying, because I think that they did a raid
Right.
of his cell, and then him and his lawyer tried to say that that was an unjust or unlawful raid because I guess there's a law where if
I think that the assistant coming forward is diabolical, right? Because we're getting all those text messages from him. But through those text messages, we're also seeing how involved he was, that he was supplying the parties, that he was setting them up, that he was in charge of getting rid of the recordings. So that made me wonder, which they didn't mention, if he gets immunity for testifying or how they got that information out of him. But either way, it's diabolical, the information he has, and
yes.
I mean, with those text messages and stuff and them showing that Diddy was doing this, they're saying almost on a daily basis towards the end, like in 2021. I mean, if they can prove that, it it's crazy. I think that he's at the part in the
Yeah.
case now where Diddy has the discovery. He knows who's gonna be testifying against him and what
Mhm.
their claims are. I would
Yeah.
like
I think that we're right in this to say that this actually the thing that we've been wanting, which should have been stopped 5 times over from the past of all the other things that he's been accused of over the years. I think that he's by his own hand is going to be the end of him, and hopefully so. I hope that we're right. I don't know how long it's going to take out because I know this court cases can go on for years, but we'll see.
Yeah,
He
we'll
did
see.
ask for a speedy trial.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's making a lot of demands. I think the amount of times that he's, like, tried to get out on bail and said, "Oh, I'll just go to my own house and have my own security watch me," all of those please is just, like it shows you that he's still out of touch thinking that, like, somewhere in the world he has enough money to get out of this, and I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I think there's just no we've seen too much. Again, like it's one thing when it's even accounts from other people. It could be people that were there, like we've seen in the past, like with the woman who was shot in the face and said, "I literally saw him," and no one believed her. She was made fun of, and she was saying that she was tearing down a good black man. And I actually heard a lot of people saying that about Cassie at first.
Mm,
And then when he settled so quickly, that's when people were like, "Oh shit." And then it again, I still think he might have gotten away with it had it not been that footage that was released of him literally beating cat. Like you cannot deny it. And then we find out that, which opens up the can of worms in the indictment in the RICO case. There's so much more footage.
right.
It's so much more footage. And you know what? I am happy that he's that big of a narcissist that he would record all of this stuff. And now that recording that he was using to manipulate, to blackmail, to whatever, extort, is going to be the one that is his final nail in his coffin. And I'm so glad that
Yeah.
that bitch is going to go to jail.
You are so right. That is such a good point. All of those videos that he was using for blackmail and all of that, they're going to be used against him now. So,
We'll see. We'll find out on Cinco de Mayo. It'll be at least the start of it, which I think is the craziest day to start something so crazy. You gotta get everybody's gonna be drunk and like content creating, and it's gonna be wild, I feel like.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Nat, for coming and really giving us some clarity on on things that were missed in this documentary, things that were highlighted. And because you've been on, like I said, you've been covering this for I feel like a couple of years now, like from the beginning.
Right.
And to the point where you were featured in the documentary that Peacock released, like that's how long you have been covering this. So I knew that you would be the perfect person to come on and really try to make what kind of sense we can make with the puzzle pieces that we've been provided. And I really appreciate your honesty and just the way in which that you have been able to give all of this complex, really dark information about the case in such a palatable and easy to follow way. I really do look to you as one of the content creators to keep up to date with this case because it is a lot to go through.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That is like so kind. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to stay up to date as everybody else. And TikTok is the fastest, best place to get it. I mean, these things that are coming out in the documentary now, we are talking about on TikTok at the end of 2023. So if you want to be on top of things, I think that is the place to be current on it, and I'm gonna try to keep staying current on it. Obviously, like you said,
Also, no pressure. You don't have to. Also, because
this
I know
is
it is a lot.
like I said, this is something that I am just interested in, you know,
Mhm.
and I would be digging through it, and I would be going through old video clips just out of my own curiosity.
Mhm.
And so to find a group of people who are interested in sharing and continuing the discussion and collaborating, I mean, I think it's a really good thing, and it's a really cool thing to see our media kind of move in that direction and move
Yeah.
away from these curated facades that we're
Yeah.
seeing break up. So it's really cool to get a chance to talk to you. I'm so happy we got to do this, and we went through so much information. So
I know we did, and I appreciate you so much. You really made this such an enjoyable, like, way. It's a dark subject, so I'm not enjoyable. But you made this
right.
an interesting conversation, a conversation that I think is so important to have. And I think again, it's just giving the room for other people to feel brave enough to know that people will want to believe them, that will want to fight for them, and that they do have a voice. So I appreciate you for being one of those voices that help amplify potential victims and giving them a safe space. I really think that like, I know some people don't understand the power of TikTok, but that is the power of TikTok. It really is.
Thank you.
And can you tell everybody where you can continue to see and get updated on all things Diddy and also all things a lot of pop culture?
Yeah. So we're getting into all kinds of things over there. But to keep up with me, my main platform is TikTok, Nat. I'm also on Instagram, Nat. I'm starting to get into the YouTube, so check me out over there. It's Nat with an underscore, and basically same name across platforms. I'll be there yapping about something. So
And we will be there to consume it. Thank you so much again. And yeah, so until Cinco de Mayo.
yeah, we'll see what happens next. Thank you so much for having me, and
Of
look forward to
course.
talking to you soon.
Yes. Woo, another Diddy documentary in the bucket. And you know what? I think he's going to be a bad boy for life behind bars. Hopefully. We'll find out because the trial is set for May 5th, which is Cinco de Mayo. And I'm going to be covering this as more documentary comes out, or if there's anything big that happens during the trial, I'll be, plopping in Diddy here and there throughout the podcast. So, look forward to that. I want to give a big thank you to Nat for joining us and giving us her expertise because, like I said in the episode, she has been covering this Diddy case from the beginning and she has so much content. So if you want to know more details, I suggest you go over to her TikTok where she has it all downloaded, okay? And you can follow her there at Nat. All of this information will be listed in the show notes, so don't worry if you don't have to rewind it, is what I'm trying to say. It's in the show descriptions below, as well as my handles. And you can follow me on all my platforms, Instagram, TikTok, at PJV, again, found in the show details. Woo, that was Another great documentary. I do think that the Max documentary was better than the Peacock documentary. And I know that there are going to be more documentaries because, again, like we said, I think 50 Cent has one that he sold to Netflix called Did He Do It? I think that one's going to be more, I think, salacious because it's definitely going to be from 50 Cent's perspective, and he is a wild one. So let's get ready for that one. And next week's episode is going to be about Summer House. We've been doing some really serious documentaries with a lot of trigger warnings, so I wanted to take it back. Let's take it back. Let's get a little light. So we're going to take it back to Bravo, and we're going to talk to Josh, and he and I are going to pop off about Summer House. And every episode will drop on a Wednesday first thing. So again, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you get informed when those episodes drop. And again, thank you so much for listening. And I can't wait to see you back here next Wednesday with a brand new episode of Pia Pops Off. Oh, what does Pia always say? Oh yeah, pop off!